Welcome to this Transplant Systems presentation on problems associated with fine texture soil mix in the float system. Water holding capacity and the air porosity of a soilless mix is impacted directly by the particle size distribution of the mix. It is important that the soil mix used in a float system has a wide range of particle size distribution. This soil mix will typically be coarse in texture. The particle size distribution ultimately impacts the air porosity of the mix. Here's how it works. First, the particle size distribution determines what the water holding capacity is. Then the water holding capacity determines what the air porosity is. And air porosity determines what the root structure looks like. The plant on the left is in a coarse mix, while the plant on the right is in a fine mix. Typically, a coarse texture mix will have a wide range of particle size distribution, while a fine texture mix will have a narrow range of particle size distribution. Small particles, fine texture, create higher water holding with lower air porosity. Large particles, coarse texture, create lower water holding with higher air porosity. A fine texture mix will therefore have a higher water holding capacity and a lower air porosity. A coarse texture mix will have a lower water holding capacity and a higher air porosity. Why is water holding capacity important if fine texture mix will grow a plant? And what are the problems associated with having high water holding capacity? There are several issues created by high water holding capacity. First, the high water holding capacity of a fine texture mix increases soluble salt issues. The more water a media takes up, the more soluble salts are left behind after evaporation. The high water holding capacity of a fine texture mix increases soluble salt issues in another way. Research has shown that there is a linear relationship between conductivity of the media and the small particle size percentage of the soilless media. In other words, as the number of small size particles increase, so does the electrical conductivity. The high water holding capacity of a fine texture mix complicates resolving soluble salt issues. In the float system, the only way we have of resolving soluble salt issues is by overhead irrigation. It is difficult to overhead irrigate a soil media that's already saturated by high water holding capacity. The high water holding capacity of a fine texture mix multiplies any water quality issues that may be present. The high water holding capacity of a fine texture mix increases the incidence of algae. High water holding capacity increases potential disease issues. Examples would be Pythium, Rhizoctonia, and black root rot. Fine texture mixes create a higher incidence of algae due to the saturated surface of the mix. Fungus gnats thrive due to the higher incidence of algae and transmit fungal root rot such as Pythium and black root rot. The plant on the left was grown in a coarse texture soil mix. The plant on the right was grown in a fine texture soil mix. Fine texture mix is more susceptible to overcompaction. Overcompaction is a leading factor in causing arrow roots. A porous and open media becomes critical when the radicle emerges and attempts to penetrate the soil surface. When selecting a soil mix for growing tobacco plants and a float system, a mix that has a wide range of particle size distribution is best suited for the float environment. This mix will be coarse in texture and will contain perlite for added porosity.